somewhat independently? Can they organize themselves in the morning, get up on time, fill out a job application? Do they have a resume? Those are things that you want to ask your school to help work on. So what we're going to do right now is introduce Jennifer Stewart. She's from the Federation for Children with Special Needs, and she's going to talk about all of the family supports that they offer. They're such a great resource, and I think that she gave out some information to you already, and so she's going to talk about what they have to offer.
Great, thank you. So the presentation I put together is actually sort of an introduction about transition planning. This presentation can be very long, or we can do it sort of expedited. And so I know that you guys have a couple other speakers, so I'm going to go through the presentation sort of quickly, but feel free to ask questions. But I just want to sort of give you an overview of the transition process. Oh, that's not showing up. So I am the Director of Transition Projects at the Federation for Children with Special Needs. We have a couple different projects at the Federation right now. One is called the Link Center, and the other one is a new project. It's the WIOA Family Support Project, which is our newest project. We just got a contract with MRC to provide family support around transition planning if you're connected to MRC. So if you have questions about that, you can answer questions at the end about that. These are just a couple projects. So I know Diane, like this is a lot to cover, but I'll go through it quickly, and if it's too much, then just say, oh, people are going to talk about this. But I just want you guys to get a good idea. So this is sort of everything that should be happening when you're talking about transition planning. So what is transition? Transition is really planning for life after high school. And so there's sort of different ways to think about transition. I think there's transition that happens, transition services in the school system. There's a referral process when we talk about Chapter 688 to adult services, and that's sort of thought of as transition. And then we have just big picture transition planning. And all of them are important, but the words can kind of get confusing. So when we talk about transition, there's different ways to think about it. But most importantly, what we want to do is make sure we do big picture transition planning, planning for life after high school. So this is having academic and non-academic courses, employment and related training opportunities, and community living and leisure activities. All of these things are considered transition. And the ultimate goal is to help young adults move on to life after high school. For me, just to break it down and not to think about the law, what is most important and what do we want for all young adults? When they leave high school, we want them to have meaningful day activities. We want them to have somewhere safe to live. We want them to be able to get around. And we want them to have friends and relationships. This is what every human being wants. And we want the same thing for our young adults. So if we can think about even those four things, it's like you sort of move away from the IEP goals and you just think about these four things. Can we figure these four things out for our young adults? So I'll sort of skip this, but just why transition is so important is because, unfortunately, statistics for adults with disabilities are not great. The unemployment rate for adults with disabilities is around 70%, and that number has remained the same for many years. I think that we're seeing some change, hopefully with a real push. We want to get our young adults working younger than they have been typically, so there's more vocational practice taking place during the high school years. But some other statistics just around graduation rate, poverty, and the dropout rate. So this is why transition is so important. These are some of the laws that come up when we talk about transition. I won't go into them, but I will be talking about the IDEA. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that's sort of the driving force of where transition services come from in the education system. And so the purpose of the IDEA is to ensure that all children with disabilities have free and appropriate public education. So this is designed to meet their unique needs. So you want to remember that. Transition services and services should be individualized. They shouldn't look standardized for all students. They should be individualized for your student and prepare them for education, employment, and independent living. That's sort of the language of IDEA. But it's important to remember actually that transition is so much more than just education, employment, and independent living, and that it's important to practice those skills of self-determination and financial literacy, vocational, the interpersonal skills. So it's all of these skills fall under what transition is. This is just a graphic from DESE. It's talking about what they want for all students. Very similar for students with disabilities. We shouldn't have different expectations. So it's workplace readiness, academics, and personal and social development. So we should have the same standards for students with disabilities. As Diane said, so what is transition, what are transition
Just 1
services?
second. Does anyone need the book in Spanish? Okay.
It's coordinated. It's a coordinated set of activities with a results-oriented process. So it's very focused. Not everybody should receive the same transition services because they should be a result of who that individual is and what their needs are, what their interests are. So conversations at your IEP meetings, when your young adult turns 14, they change a little bit and they start talking about that young adult and their interests, their preferences, strengths, and then services are coordinated around that individual to help facilitate moving from high school to post-school. So, as Diane said also, transition services in Massachusetts start when the young adult turns 14. If your young adult is 13 and all of a sudden your transition team is coming together and saying, let's have a transition meeting, don't be afraid. Say thank you, because that means they're preparing and they're thinking about getting that, young adult ready. So it's okay, but most of the time it's happening when they're 14. And transition services will occur until they graduate or age out. This is for anybody who's on an IEP, so not if you're on a 504, you can't receive transition services, and it's for all disabilities. These are just examples of what transition services might look like. So we're going to be doing career awareness, community experiences, inclusion and general education classes. These are sort of evidence-based practices of good transition services. So I just have a list here, and I won't go into all of them. But sort of self-care, independent living, social skills, you'll hear me repeat those because those are all so important. This is just a guidepost. It's a framework to think about transition. We don't want to think about transition just in terms of school, but these other aspects that help transition come together. So you'll see family involvement is a key piece to having a successful transition. I'm just highlighting other guides and tools to use in your planning process using transition timelines. I saw that a transition timeline was handed out. We also have a packet for you that has a transition timeline in the guidebook as well. Maybe you've seen this before. This is from our Department of Education in Massachusetts. It's sort of showing what transition means when we're in high school and then when we're moving to post-secondary. So post-secondary, when we're out of high school. Post-secondary success to DESE means education and training, competitive employment, independent living, and community participation. And you see on the left-hand side we have a student, and we have a student who has goals. And while they're still in school, they're surrounded by that blue, and that blue circle is the school, transition assessment, your IEP, your transition planning form, and all of those things support the student while they're in school. But you'll see, as they move towards post-secondary success, the school is no longer there. And that's the message we really want to make clear if you get anything out of the presentation, is to understand when you transition out of high school, that school system and that support system is no longer there. And then what's important is the family, community, adult services, community services. So realizing how strong those connections are, because that school and what they're providing and all of these services that are an entitlement will no longer be there when you leave the high school system. I'll go through this quickly. Just the parents' role in transition planning is so important. One, just sort of helping to guide the process, keeping on point, what should we be doing, what should we be practicing. But really helping to provide opportunities for your young adults, whether it's volunteering or connecting to some neighbors that might open up a job opportunity. But I think most importantly, really talking to them about what it is that they're interested in and helping provide them with opportunities to pursue that. Because when it comes to transition, there's a shift, and all of a sudden the student has actually the main role in transition. And this is best practice. This is what we want to see. We want to see the student at the center of the transition planning process. We want to hear, what is your vision? What is it that you want to do? What do you think that you're good at? And there's that shift also. All these years they've been hearing maybe at their IEP meetings if they've been attending, or from their parents or teachers, what they're not good at. Well, we're shifting. Now we're going to talk about what are you good at and how can we practice opportunities and provide opportunities for you to explore your interests. This is what we want to see happening in the transition years. So really giving them opportunities to explore their interests is what transition is all about, through sort of self-determination and self-advocacy. These are the years where we're wanting to provide opportunities to make choice. So this is very important both at home and in school, right? So we want paraprofessionals, we want teachers to also know this and not to do things for our children, but to provide them with opportunities to take leadership roles in the school and then at home too. They need to make the choices about what they're having for breakfast, what they're going to wear, all of those things. Even if they're limited, what can they potentially make decisions about? Because it's so important just during these years for them to make mistakes, because that's how they learn. That's how they're going to grow. Touch briefly on transition assessments. This is, so all these years in special education, you've been having assessments take place. When we hear the word transition assessment, the only thing I want you to think about is it's the same thing. It's just something that happens when the young adult turns 14, and it falls under that umbrella of high school years. So any assessment is a transition assessment, okay? So age-appropriate transition assessments are required by law, so you can request any type of assessment. There's both informal and formal assessments. So more formal assessments are going to be your achievement tests, aptitude tests. They often have a scale and rating system where maybe they're compared to other young adults the same age. And then there's informal. And I honestly see, when it comes to transition, informal assessment as being so valuable because it's observing them in the community, you know, interviewing them about their interess. Writing reflections. I love reflections. Like every day they should write a reflection. You know, what did you enjoy doing? What didn't work for you today? Was there something that you learned? That information, that's all transition assessment. Most importantly, it's just transition assessment is driven by the questions you want to know. So making lists of questions that you want answered about your young adult. Can they work 8 hours a day? How will they get around? Can they travel safely on the T? You know, those types of questions. That's what drives transition assessment. So just asking for a blanket transition assessment, maybe you're going to get some valuable information, but if you know your child the best, so what is it that you really want to find out? So that's a good way to think about transition assessment. In terms of preparing for a meeting, we want to be using the transition planning form and become pretty familiar with that form. So when you turn 14 and transition services start, you start with a transition planning form. So this form guides your meeting. You talk about the student's vision, and then after this, you move to the IEP. If you can talk to your student before you actually go to the IEP meeting about some of their interests and maybe how they want to participate in their meeting, because that's the other thing. At 14, they're invited to their meeting. So this can look different in many ways. They can come and they could lead their meeting. They could come and just sit. But we want to think about, how do you want to engage in your meeting?
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
I have an older child. When did they start allowing the child to come into the meetings? Because they didn't do that for in the 90s. They weren't doing that.
So I don't know probably the exact year of when that law changed.
That's something that's new, I think. I'm an older parent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was wondering, you know, maybe I missed.
2008.
2008.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Because they
But-
didn't do that years ago.
But still, I mean,
That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
I'm not keeping up with things.
right. But it's good to be aware of that, because a lot of times parents still don't even know that their children are invited because they're not attending, but they are invited, and a decision needs to be made about whether they're attending or not. I'm going quickly.
No, that's
No?
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The last point, learn about graduation requirements. This is so important. You want to make sure you're talking to your team about, are we on the same page as to when this young adult is graduating? Because I don't know how many calls I get at the Federation where parents are calling me saying, they didn't know that their child was graduating this year, and it just boggles my mind, you know, it's like, how did we get to this place? So we really want to make sure that that's a topic of conversation, and that the team and the parent and the young adult are all on the same page as to when that young adult is graduating. I won't talk too much about this. This is the transition planning form. There's 3 different components. We're going to talk about the post-secondary vision, so what that student wants to do after high school. I will say sometimes this is like controversial as to whose vision it is. I highly recommend that the student's vision goes on there no matter what. And then if the parents or the team has a different opinion, that could also go on there, but you have to sort of respect and hear what that student says, and I would put that on the form. And this vision that's on the transition planning form gets transferred directly over to the IEP, so there should be no change in that form. You also talk about disability-related needs. This is what the student, you know, what are their needs, and this is how you help to develop your IEP goals. So using and walking this form is actually sometimes not taking place, but it can be a very powerful tool to help develop your IEP. An action plan. I love action plans. If you don't have a plan for who's going to do it and when are you going to do it by, a lot of times these things just fall flat, right? It just is a lofty vision. It doesn't actually happen. So a vision should, in general, this is what DESE recommends, it should include a goal around education and training, around employment, and if applicable, or appropriate independent living skills. So I think my recommendation is the more detailed you can be about a vision, the better, because a vision is really what drives your transition services and your IEP. So the more detailed you can be and help your student get there, the better. And just thinking about what are tools you can use with the young adults, this is just an example. You know, if the transition planning form is something that, you know, their eyes are going cross, you know, it's like, well, what if we look at something else? You know, where do you want to live? Where do you want to work? What do you want to do for fun? How are we going to get around, and who are you going to hang out with? These are the questions. These are the questions we want to know from our young adults. This is transition in the IEP where you're going to see it. I'm not going to go through this because you have the slides, just because I know I don't have that much time. And I've sort of gone through this. I just want to highlight about the process. The transition planning form is not a legal document. So I'm saying start with the transition planning form and then go to the IEP. But the transition planning form is thought of as a flexible brainstorming tool, so it's a tool to use. But if you write something on the transition planning form that doesn't make its way onto the IEP, it's not legally binding, right? So the IEP is the only legal document, and so you need to make sure that things are getting transferred to the IEP. The end of entitlement, right? So I talked about that earlier. So you have all of these services, and then there's an end. And that end is usually when they accept the diploma. So that could be at 18, or that could be if they decide to stay and they age out when they turn 22. If they do decide to stay past their graduation date of their peers when they turn 18, they can participate in a social graduation. I think maybe Diane said that her daughter did that. So that's relatively new law. And another thing just to know is you can't ask the school, but they should provide a summary of performance so you have a nice sort of review of, you know, the students' high school years of what they achieved. Graduation, what does that mean? You have to pass all 3 MCAS tests in the 10th grade. And you also have to meet your local graduation requirements. So finding out what your local graduation requirements are important. I want to quickly mention there's something called an EPP. So if your student is close to passing the MCAS, which is a proficiency score of 240, so if they're close within a certain range, they can get put on an EPP, which is a plan within the school to help that student pass the MCAS. If they are not on the track to pass MCAS, they will just receive a certificate of achievement or a certificate of attendance.
So if they don't take the MCAS, to sum it up in a nutshell, if they don't take the MCAS, they just get a certificate. If they don't take the MCAS at all.
Right.
But if they take the MCAS, they will get a diploma.
If they pass the MCAS.
Okay.
So it needs to be proficient, not needs improvement.
Right. Well, they would get on an EPP plan potentially if they were close. And the EPP is overseen by the principal of the school. And they would come up with a plan to help that student potentially pass within the subject area of math or ELA.
Do you want to also touch upon, because I remember I mentioned like some kids, like their social skills are where they should be, or some of their skills, they're just not there yet, and you feel like the school maybe hadn't done enough. So those are conversations to have in the IEP meeting, because you don't have to graduate. You don't have to accept that diploma if you feel like they're not ready. So just remember that at your meetings, because I've met families who have young adults who had no idea, and their child graduated, and then they were at home because they didn't have those skills. They didn't have their resume. They didn't know how to navigate a college campus. So those are all things that definitely go into transition.
Definitely, we see that, and a lot of our calls with the Federation are about that too, but then it still goes back to your IEP. And what does your IEP say? And hopefully the IEP has goals and services in there that relate to the student's vision, and if those weren't met, then there's an argument that that student is not ready to graduate. But if there's not anything that's in the IEP, you don't have much of an argument. So then you kind of, oh, he passed MCAS, oh my goodness, they're graduating. And so that's what we see a lot. So it's sort of making sure that you plan from the get-go, having those good conversations. I just want to highlight sort of turning 18 and what this means. Turning 18, this is the age of majority. So, you know, technically your young adult is now an adult, and all of the decision-making are now transferred from the parent to the young adults. And so this isn't just relevant in special education, but in all aspects of life. Their healthcare decisions, their financial decisions. As I say, a youth can vote, buy a house, or get married. My next slide talks about sort of alternatives and ways to do shared decision making. Of course, there is an option of guardianship as well. But other things to just highlight when you turn 18, that all males must register for the Selective Service. You are eligible for SSI and Mass Health, and then it's also recommended to maybe apply for Section 8 housing if the individual might think that they would be interested in not even living independently one day, but just living outside of their own home, and then, you know, you could figure out puzzle pieces of how that housing would look. But there's a waiting list, right? So just 10 years out, might your young adult be interested in this? I won't go through this, but as I said, so there's guardianship, which is the full legal going to the court and receiving guardianship over a young adult. And then there's other options to just have joint bank accounts, power of attorney, healthcare proxies, to make those decisions a little bit more feasible. I mentioned Chapter 688, so this is something I want you to be aware of, because this is sort of a referral from the high school to an adult service agency that your child might be eligible for. So this is not a continuation of special education. It's not a determination of eligibility. So if a referral is sent, that doesn't mean they're eligible. It just means that that adult service agency knows your son or daughter exists. And it's not an entitlement. So there's no guarantee that they're going to get services from this adult service agency. But these are some examples. So it would be like MRC, DBS, DMH. These are the agencies that I'm talking about. Your school should talk to you about this 2 years before your young adult is going to leave high school. So that's sort of the planning process. That's the idea, the ideal. So another reason why those conversations around when is my son or daughter graduating, well, that's a really important conversation to help make sure that 688 is in fact sent. Just want to highlight there's a continuum of options when we're talking about all of these things. You know, what track is my son or daughter on? You know, there are many different tracks, and they're all, you know, appropriate to make sure they match with what's appropriate for your young adult, their interests, the supports they need. So as you can see, there's a range of education opportunities, employment, and independent living. I leave you with sort of just these questions that you want to make sure you're thinking about as a parent and talking about with your young adult of just what will they do all day, where are they going to live, how are they going to get around, what government assistance do they qualify for, who will pay for their expenses, and what will happen when I no longer care for them. So these are the sort of questions and fears that we have around transition. the earlier you can kind of think about them, talk about them, and plan, and call the Federation or whoever, or these other support systems, the better off you'll be. We do have a transition listserv that you can join to kind of get kept in the loop about different things going on in our state. I have our website up here as well as DESI's secondary transition website. As Diane mentioned, we have a 2-day Planning a Life transition conference. So it's this presentation, well, actually it's much more than this presentation, but really drawn out and giving you more of those tools to feel that you can, plan for a life after high school. So, and then I just have some resources. So I know that was quick. I hope that was a good, quick overview. And I can probably take a few questions and then I'll let the other speakers go. And I have handouts here, and then we also handed out a packet. So.
I have a question. I was wondering, what is how is this information transferred to high schools? So let's say a parent didn't come tonight, or a representative of high school wasn't here this evening. What is the connection made between the Federation and the high schools? So the high schools is it the guidance counselor?
Sure. So is your concern that maybe the people who work in the school don't even know this information?
Well, I'm just curious because I don't have a high school student on an IEP. I'm here representing one of my children's high school because the town council we're kind of disseminated that way. So I'm here for Snowden. And I know that they do have students there that are on an IEP and that are seniors and transitioning. So I'm just wondering if I didn't come tonight, would they?
So you can always reach out to the Federation. We do trainings all over the state. And we are working closely with the Boston SpedPac to make sure, so this group to make sure, we can figure out how to get information to parents, and then a partnership with the schools as well. So there's actually an initiative in Boston.
So I guess I want, like I said, is it parent engagement or
They should be telling the parents at an IEP meeting starting at age 14, they should be talking about transition starting at age 14. Unfortunately, maybe not all schools are doing that. And sometimes it's good that you're here to give that information because power, knowledge is power, right? So you can go back and then you can tell the parents and then they can ask that question to start the conversation. But it should automatically be happening in school. And Marisa McCarthy from Boston Public Schools is here and she's going to also present and she will touch upon that. But schools should be telling families and working with the families. And if they're not, that is definitely something that you can talk to Marisa about. No, I know, but that does happen
but I
sometimes.
guess I will say also, I think for what we do, at the Federation in terms of educating parents is to make you feel that you are the advocate. And when you go to the meeting, in the packet you'll see 3 different brochures. So they're called TIPS brochures, and they are DESI's advisories on transition, translated to be like a nice family-friendly brochure. So you bring that to your meeting and say, oh, I'm sorry, I know that, we're supposed to start with the transition planning form, and I would like us to follow, the advisory from DESI on this. So it is parents' role to also influence and push the system, because that's ultimately how change does happen, is parents also taking on that advocacy role.
But I think that's the key thing that a lot of parents don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, not even talking about high school, just parents that have children on a high school in the 3rd or 4th grade have no idea the Federation even exists or know that they have the power. It actually is their reason. They don't really see it as such. So, but thank you.
Yeah. Did you have a question also?
I did. I was wondering about with the graduation requirements. I thought if students get a needs improvement and they get put on an ETP plan, they do an extra year of math or whatever, then I assume kids graduate that way. I never reached
Well, and it's a decision by the principal, so that may
So
be
it is.
yeah. So yeah, you can see them pass, right? It's a it's a
Special
decision
ed
made
teacher
within the
and
school.
also- Yeah.
All right.
Does anyone have any other questions?
About the 2-day conference,
Yes.
you need to sign up for it or just walk in, or what time is it? Because I didn't say the time in here.
Yeah. So nope, you have to go to our website, and I probably don't have that there. So if you go to the Link Center website, you can click on Planning a Life, and you register online. And we do have scholarships available. So I think you said that you went for free. This conference used to be under a grant, and it was for free. So now we do charge for both days, but you can apply for a scholarship. So,
they do charge for it.
hmm?
They do charge for it. There's
We
no-
do, but we do also have scholarships. Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you so
Thanks.
much. Thank you. And so next we have Jay O'Brien. Jay O'Brien is the founder of Exceptional Lives, which is a really terrific website tool that can help you navigate anywhere from when your child is born all the way into adulthood. And we asked Jay to come and present to you because, as you can see, transition, there's a lot of information. So this is a great place for you to go on your own. You can refer to it. It really can give you some good tools as a parent, and also, if teachers in the room, for instance, guardianship, you can go on there, and it really breaks it down very nicely for you. And you can also download applications as well, which can be really helpful. So Jay's going to talk about his website.
Right. I love when technology works. Could I just hand out, take one and maybe pass it on? Just a very simple two-sided brochure. Our website is on the bottom of the back side. Thank you, Diane and Carolyn and John and Kristen and Steve. It's great to be here. I've been here before, but it's been a little while. So again, I'm Jay O'Brien, co-founder, director of a nonprofit based in Boston called Exceptional Lives. And I'm going to give you a brief intro and then give you a sample of some of the free online guides that we're sharing with the world and encourage you to take advantage of them. I really love to follow folks like, I think it was Jennifer. She's got the substance. What we're trying to do in a way is take the expertise from the brains and the minds and the books and the PowerPoints of people like Jennifer and the Federation and MRC and other leading nonprofits and state agencies, and really just repackage that to give it to you in a better, easier, more plain language way. So just a few minutes about our mission. Our mission is first and foremost to help parents and caregivers of children with developmental and intellectual disabilities, and to give you information, as I said, in a more efficient way than maybe you've had access to it before. The same type of information that we're listening to tonight. The problem we're trying to solve is an information problem. What stands in between you and your child getting the services and supports they need, or your understanding of the information about those services and supports. So if you're like many parents nowadays and you go to the internet, you'll either go to Google and get millions of results, or you'll end up on very comprehensive but dense and hard to read websites like Social Security. The result is stress, anxiety, frustration, and missed opportunities to get or delays to get the services and supports you need. We're trying to solve that problem. And we're doing so in a few ways. I'll highlight tonight the top middle free personalized plain language guides in various topical areas. And here they are. We just launched these guides less than a year ago. They're in the areas, and many of these are transition kind of relevant. SSI. When your child turns 18, even if he or she doesn't qualify for SSI at 17 and younger, they may qualify as an adult at 18. And we walk you through that in easy-to-read steps. We have two special education guides. If you're not yet involved in the special education system, we tell you how to potentially understand to qualify for that, what kinds of evaluations and assessments or diagnosis that you need in order to get tapped into the system. Once you're in the system, we have a guide on how to create an effective IEP, which I can show you some examples of the screens in that plain language guide. We also have a guide on improving or optimizing your health insurance, including the different Mass Health programs that we have here in Massachusetts, but also autism-related health insurance is in that guide. And then we have guardianship and the alternatives to guardianship. Guardianship is not an all or nothing thing. It's another topic where when your child turns 18, things change. So you need to know what you can do and what your options are in that area as well. We are soon coming out with a resource directory, also free, so that you can find out resources in your local area. So more on that, we think, in January 2017, if not sooner. This is what we think makes our way of presenting information just a little different. We have this web-based software that allows us to ask you questions and use your answers to give you relevant info and filter out what's not relevant to you based on the age of your child or the disability type or your preferences. You can give us answers which are very private and confidential, but we only use those answers to give you information that matters to you. And again, by filtering out what's not relevant, we're trying to help solve that information problem, that information overload problem that we identified earlier. We have a plain language expert on staff, and we're all becoming expert in this. But to turn the government jargon and legalese into easier to read terms so that you can get through it. Experts say that we really need to bring this readability level for parents down to a 6th grade reading level, if not a 3rd or 4th grade. Not because you can't read higher than that, it's because everybody here is pressed for time. And the more plain language we can make something, the easier and quicker you can get through it and get what you need for your child or children with disabilities. We also focus on action steps, things you can do in the real world today to make progress. And again, as I mentioned, these guides are free and available through the magic of the internet around the clock. Our data shows that a lot of parents are actually going into these guides at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, because that's when you have time to spend 5 or 10 minutes or whatever you have to get this kind of information when the kids are in bed and the rest of the day is behind you. So just some quick numbers. I'll highlight a few. Down in the left-hand corner, you can't read it, but since we've had these guides out, and particularly recently, we're now up to 90% of parents and 95% of professionals would recommend these guides, these free guides to other parents. Not perfect, but we're aspiring to be perfect. We want to reach 100% on those. But almost 20,000, I think actually we passed 20,000 parents and professionals have started using these guides just in the last 11 months alone. And some of the things that parents say about these guides. I can boil this down to what we kind of look at as what we're trying to do for parents. We're trying to give you a place to start and start at square one and then walk through in an easy fashion to make progress through understanding what your guardianship options are, understanding how to qualify and apply for SSI, how to be a more effective member of that IEP team, etc. So I'm going to stop that, and then I'm going to give you a couple quick samples of our guides. If I can now work my own computer. How about that? Exit show, that's what I'm looking for. Okay, so I have a couple options here. I'm going to first show you, say, our health insurance guide. Taking 2 minutes. Gives you a real quick introduction to what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. And it won't let me. All right, let's try guardianship. And I'm not going to take you through all of these, but so you would access trying to get the full screen view here. Here we go. You would. How come you're not seeing what I'm seeing? All right. I think that's probably why. Give me a second.
Is that extended screen or is that duplicated?
Just it's showing my
Is your desktop?
my desktop. So what I can do is this. Let us just simply open up a browser. And I'll take you on the...
Drag this way? Is it over here?
Oh, wait.
You just drag it, it's an extension of the screen. You just drag this browser this way, and the screen right here.
Oh, I get it. Magic. I think this will do. Although I can't see it. This is going to be... So I'm seeing the forest, and you guys are seeing...
You try to duplicate it if you want.
Yeah. Well, I think I can get through it.
Use the mouse and the...
Right. It's going to be a little weird, but... So this is the exceptionallives.org website. You can come here, click Start Your Own Guide, and see our list of guides. We'll jump into, we'll start off with guardianship, because this is a transition-themed event. I'm already logged in, so you're seeing my... But this is what you see. You see a welcome screen. And again, we are going to ask you questions, use your answers to walk you through guardianship and the alternatives to guardianship. So once you're ready to start, we ask you questions. Now, some of the questions are yes, no, black and white. Some others require a little bit of thought. But again, we try to break it down into easy to read, easy to answer terms. And in this case with guardianship, this first question is, if your child needs a lot of help with decision making, we'll show you guardianship, full guardianship first. But if your child can make decisions in some areas and maybe needs a little support, a little more support in other areas, we'll show you, we'll take you through all the different alternatives to guardianship as well. So let's do that. So as we go through, we'll ask a few questions, and what we try to do in every case is tell you why we're asking a question. If you answer this, we're going to show you that. So we'll take you through less restrictive alternatives to guardianship, like healthcare proxies or powers of attorney, things that no parent or no professional knows before you kind of start walking through this for the first time. So we don't presume that you know what these terms mean. We walk you through it, and where they require definition, we give that to you in easy to access ways. So in this case, and we take you through what types of decision making your child is capable of. We ask you about government benefits, and in this case, if SSI is involved, and we have a free SSI guide as well, you as the parent or caregiver should be considering something called a representative payee or a rep payee, so we walk you through that. In this case, we'll say no. Now again, you can go through these guides right now on your own mobile phone, or if you have a computer or a tablet, anytime, day or night, from the comfort of your own home or office, and put in your answers and get the info that's relevant to you. So if I don't answer something the way you would, you can simply answer it your own way.
Do you have an app, or is it like just using the full website on the
That's a
phone?
great question. We don't yet have an app. Like, you couldn't get an icon for Exceptional Lives on your phone yet, but we're working towards that. And I'm going to go, let me quickly go through and show you what the output is. We go through the questions, and there's usually anywhere from 2 to 10 questions in a given guide. In this case here, the type of disability affects the paperwork you would get and go through and fill out. So we ask you that question. And then we say, thank you for answering the questions. You can name your guide. If you have more than one child, you can say Joseph's Guide. And then here we go. So we have a welcome section in each guide, and then we walk you through. This is the sort of the table of contents, all the different steps. You can use it as a printable checklist as well. You can see the progress bar coming up. You get little congratulations messages along the way. So that is just to give you a quick taste of the format of our guides. You'll see that in many of these, where there are important forms, you can pop open the forms and download these to your local computer. Someday, in the next year or so, we're going to help you fill out the forms right on the computer to make it even easier for you, no matter what those forms may be. Where there is extra information, we give you the option of opening a box, and like here, if you want to get the next level of detail, if you're one of those parents that wants to know more and has the time to know it, you can pop open these additional boxes. We try to present the information, again, in plain language, but with some images as well, so it's not just reading blocks of text like we saw on that Social Security website earlier. And so that is just one of our guides. I would love to take just 2 more minutes before I hand off to the next
Can I just wait
presenter.
right now?
Yes, Carolyn.
So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Carolyn Kane. I'm the chair of Boston SpedPac. I have a daughter with disabilities, significant disabilities. So I actually went onto the website and walked through the questions, you know, and it's sort of like what type of how significant is your child's disabilities, and I know that she has an intellectual disability. So I filled out all the questions, and it took me to sort of what I need to do for guardianship, but it also brings you to the page where it shows you the actual forms that you need to file in court and what paperwork that you need to take to your child's doctor and who you have to get the paperwork from to be able to fill it out. I have to tell you that I'm also an attorney, and if you went on to the probate court's website, you would never be able to figure out which documents that you need and how to fill them out. And so this is really, I can't say how good a tool this is to walk you through not only guardianship, but issues like filing for SSI. It really breaks it down to a level where parents can understand it, and then you can do it then, or you can read it, you save it for yourself, and then you go back in and open it, and you don't have to start all over again. It has your separate file saved for you. So use it yourselves and let other parents know about it, because it's the most easy to use tool that I've found out there as a parent. So, you know, he can only give you a limited snapshot of what it is, but I can tell you that I went through the process of myself of going through and answering the questions, and I was amazed at how easy it was to do, and also how helpful the information was that it gave me, because I've looked for it through the main websites of like the court system, or even through, you know, Social Security and that, and it's in a much more manageable way. So I can't overstate what a good tool it is. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. I could never say that better than she just said. Thank you. I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of the IEP guide, because in this guide, after answering a few questions, you can get right to the not only the IEP form, we break it down and kind of take the mystery out of that form, especially for those who are going through the IEP process for the first time, or it's just been the first year or two, but also the transition planning form, which is, you know, can and should be part of the IEP process starting no later than age 14 for the child. And we ask you questions that matter, and we, based on your answers, we'll ask you some additional questions depending on how you answer. So we're even filtering the questions that you see based on your unique situation. So you'll find this is the third question in the guide, and this is entirely related, as we explained down here in the why we're asking part. If your child is 14 or older, we'll take you through the transition form as part of the IEP process. And based on how you answer these questions, we present the info. Here's the thank you for answering the questions again. You can skip right to any part of this, or a lot of parents go through it in order, but you don't have to. So, and we walk you through the steps. Here's what you can do. You'll see that on a lot of these screens. Again, the action steps that you can take today. You can pop open the transition form, download it to your own computer, but then simply scroll down, and we take each section of the form, and there are 3 main sections of the transition planning form, and we kind of coach you through what you as a parent or caregiver should be thinking of as you get ready to tackle this transition planning form as part of the IEP. So we don't yet have specific transition-related guides, but in the next 12 months we'll be working on guides that are specific for young adults with disabilities and their parents, transition to work, transition to college, and transition to independent living. So those three guides we are planning to have available by, we hope, the beginning of the school year 2017-2018. And I'll stop there. Thank you. Sorry I rushed through that, but please, question.
Does your guide have a language preference, or is it just all in English right now?
Yeah, we are taking this first year to get it right in English first and to get it down into plain language English. But we're now talking with translation companies to do culturally competent translations. And we want to start with Spanish, but as quickly as we can go to Portuguese, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Haitian Creole. And that's where we'll start. We don't trust things like Google Translate because it's just
inaccurate.
It's not accurate enough. Yeah, seems like you've had experience with that too. But great question. We hope to have at least the Spanish versions of these available within about 6 months.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you have some more information about REPAY and all that stuff? Because is it available at exceptionallives.org?
Yeah. So you can go into the SSI guide or the guardianship guide, and just based on your answers, given that you're interested in that topic, your answers will lead you to that information. So what I can make it even easier for you if you drop me an email or a phone call.
Certainly, yes, I will. I don't have the ability with the phone I have now, but I can just leave you my email. Or
why don't you write it down on that?
Okay.
And I'll take that. And then for all other folks, I can leave a little stack of business cards near the waters in the back. So if you would love to reach out and ask a specific question, great. We also have toll-free phone-in and online message support as well. So as you're going through the guide and you need to reach out, you can certainly do that as well.
That's just it.
Yeah, we don't have the phone number on there, but the email is on there, I think on the bottom front. So that info at Exceptional Lives. We're a small team based in Boston, so that info at exceptionallives.org email will go to an actual human being, which will get it as soon as you send it, and will respond to it. Unlike other info at email addresses. Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. Two more presentations. I know we only go until 8:30, so we only can give them 15 minutes each, but we really wanted to try to give you as much information on transition in 90 minutes. Sorry. So now we're going to hear from two folks from MRC, Jessica and Jesus. MRC is a Mass Rehab Commission. It's one of our state agencies. And if you haven't heard of it yet, if your child is in high school, you should have a counselor assigned to your high school. Sometimes they might come into an AP meeting, but they might be working with your special education team. And then there's vocational options, and I think the employment specialist from MRC Jessica is here as well. So they have a wealth of knowledge for you tonight to talk about in 15 minutes. But that this is something that you can also bring back to your school, because like I said, there should be someone who is a representative that is going to your high school.
Yes.
So, good evening, my name is Jesus Mendez. Jessica White, with Mass Rehab Commission. I am a vocational rehab counselor, but I'm also a transition counselor at some of the Boston Public Schools. Right now I'm covering the Burke High School, I'm covering CASH, and I'm covering some vocational programs at Madison, and Dearborn and Dorchester Academy. So those are some of the schools that I work with. Like she said, most of our program is really catered towards working with students with individual education plans. And what we do is we go to the schools, we meet with the special education director, and we figure out which students would benefit from our services. And mostly, some of the services that we offer are geared towards employment. So the way that we work is we try to help students transition from high school towards employment. The way that we do that is we work with them to try to develop a plan and figure out what it is that they're interested in. So, you know, some of the things that we help with is college, skills training, and also job placement services. The way that we, actually do our job is just we go to the schools. If we're invited to an IEP meeting, we'll attend the IEP meeting with them, figure out what some of their limitations are, and then we'll sit down with the student and figure out the right course of action. Along the whole process, we're also, working with parents to figure out what would be the best plan for the student, and to figure out whether, what their needs, what needs they have, and figure out how we can best meet those needs. We try to work with the schools as much as we can in terms of trying to figure out what information we can get from the students. So the way that we work is we'll go to the school, we'll do a referral for our services. We put them in a wait list. Our wait list is a month. After the wait list, we ask for documentation such as psychological evaluations, which they should have one done. If they don't have one done, we have the school schedule one so that then we can have some documentation to be able to help them become eligible. These psychological evaluations are also important if they're interested in going to college, because that would help with reasonable accommodations that they need in school. After we do that, they will come in, they will meet with us, and we would actually work on developing a plan for employment. Some of the services that we also have are pre-employment training services, which is really geared toward working with juniors in high school, or seniors who are probably in the, whether they may not be graduating or not, and we have a lot of different programs that would be able to give them internship opportunities, such as, CVS, we have JVS, Jewish Vocational Service, which is one of our vendors, Community Work Services, and they have different types of internships in those programs that they can help students with, work experience, so that they can at least get that before they graduate from high school. So it's really, there's a whole lot of different services that we have. We also do, evaluations for assistive technology if the student is interested in going to college and that is needed. We try to accommodate them in every way we can, whether it's transportation to go to school and back, whether it's, if they're planning to go to work, we would help them with clothing so that they can get some help in starting to work. We also offer funding for college. We also offer funding to help them with books, and like I said, transportation. So I mean, it varies. We can do a lot in terms of what we can offer to students, depending on case-by-case basis. Some of the things that we do, I mean, is
I think part of, I'm Jessica White, I'm a job placement specialist in the Roxbury office of Mass Rehab Commission. So that's where Jesus and I work. We're fortunate that we have 2 Boston offices of Mass Rehab. We have 26 offices in the whole state, and 2 a few miles down the street from each other. So I started off as a vocational rehab counselor, and I was out in Boston public schools, just like Jesus is. But now my position as a job placement specialist is to take a look at our clients who have built skills, have recent education, and they're ready to work. They're not just looking for a summer internship, they are ready to move on to that piece of adulthood that is their first real job. So we find that it's so important to have students who are coming out of high school with internships, paid or not, some kind of experience that gives them exposure to the world of work, has the opportunity to build up work references, and just have an idea of what they like and don't like. Because by the time they get to me, the expectation, they're for the most part ready to work. So I fill in the pieces with making sure there's an awesome resume, that the interview skills are there, just having a conversation with an adult employer sitting across from you. I run workshops and groups on job readiness skills. So at the age of 16 is when, you know, MRC has the ability to first start working with your children, and it's so important to have these resources available where they have these opportunities to have employment. So I always love looking at a young person who's coming out of school who has volunteered every summer for the last 6 summers. It's okay if they haven't gotten paid. I can work with that because we're talking about exposure to a professional workplace, exposure to working with different people and populations, and having some set of professional skills so that they're more likely to pursue the employment that they're looking for. We have representation across all Boston public schools. Some of the schools I used to cover, which I miss so dearly, McKinley South End, Fenway, school that's so fond to me that I now forget their name.
We cover all Boston schools, and if we're not covering them right now, we should be covering them soon. Yeah. What happens is sometimes the schools don't even know that, you know, we have services available for students within the education plan. So, but our hope is that we go to each and every school and we have a counselor covering each and every school in Boston.
So we're in Roxbury, we're on Dimmock Street, our downtown office is on Tremont Street. Just because you might live in Dorchester but go to school in East Boston, we cover each high school based on the location of the high school, not based on the address of the student. That's because we're actually going into the high schools during the school day to meet with your student. We're not expecting out of school time, you know, leave at 11, miss a test, come and meet with us. No, we're actually going into your schools.
And we do that just to kind of get familiar with the students at school and see, you know, and also meet with teachers if teachers really, you know, some teachers are very helpful in telling us how the students interact in their classes, or what, you know, what are some of their needs, or what are some of their interests, and then we can actually build on that and figure out what might be a good vocational plan moving forward for them in terms of what type of work they would like to do. We also want them to grow as adults. So a lot of, you know, once we finish that part in high school, we expect them to kind of participate with us and come to our offices and meet with us in our offices. You know, I have a lot of students who I still have that I've had since maybe 2013 that are still going to college, and, you know, they're still working on their whether it's a bachelor's degree and an associate's degree. So it's, you know, we're actually just helping them go into adulthood and figuring out how to do things after high school.
Can we share our combined success story? So we can end on this positive note. So Jesus had a young man that you were working with right out of high school, right? And had some volunteer experience, but was really looking to MRC to provide kind of that jumping off point, some kind of exposure to figuring out if he wanted to work as a cook or a dietary aid, and really didn't know how to just get his foot in the door. So that's where we came into play. And he tried an opportunity for a few months, and in that time realized that his work ethic was at a much higher level than some of his coworkers. Felt like he was picking up the slack too much and ended up leaving the job. Didn't have a good experience, and then kind of flopped around a little bit, trying a few jobs here and there. But the whole time was in really good communication with Jesus, and then I came into the picture, and we got him connected to a training opportunity at the Home Depot, and realized that he's much better with hands-on positions than he is with face-to-face customer service. So he just started his Home Depot career on Saturday, and he's so excited. He just really connected with the values of the store, and I don't think he would have gotten that the day after he left high school. He had to try a few things, and he's now going to be working part-time hours as a freight associate, making $12 an hour. He has the opportunity to grow and move into so much more, but
Yeah.
I'm excited
and he's come a long way, because he actually, his goal after high school was actually, he wanted to try college, like every high school student wants to. And I don't blame him. I mean, I think that that's important for them to at least get some experience. So we actually helped him attend Bunker Hill Community College for a semester. And the second semester came around and he started figuring out that maybe college wasn't for him. So, you know, after a couple of classes, he figured, you know, it's okay, I think I'm doing well, but it's a lot of work for me. So we were able to help him, you know, with placement and jobs. You know, that's the main thing, is just try to make it successful, you know, that, whether it is going to school or whether it is finding employment.
So I'm not going to pass this out because it's a little overwhelming, but if you have a current high school student and you're wondering, who is this counselor from Mass Rehab that's supposed to be covering my school, I have a list, whether or not it's a counselor from our Roxbury office or our downtown Boston office. And this is just a good guide to take into your guidance department or your special ed director at your school to that next IEP meeting and say, hey, how can we get connected as part of the transition services to MRC? So I'm going to leave this behind. Or I'm going to pass it out.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I have a special needs son, and he's 14, but he's in a residential. So some of the stuff I'm hearing is for like the high school or Boston. He's still on the Boston guidelines, so we still have Boston IEP. But does anybody go to like a residential setting for IEPs?
For IEPs, I'm not quite sure how to answer that, but I would say in general, we work with people with disabilities from age 16 all the way up to 100. So at some point, parents are welcome to make direct referrals to MRC. What we're trying to do is be a little more focused and collaborative with BPS to make sure that those services are in place. So that would be my first starting point, whatever the educational kind of authority is that's governing, you know, the IEP for your son, but also looking at starting those services 2 years before he's expected to graduate. That's where MRC would come into play.
And residential should follow your son's IEP, and then I think Boston once a year would have the meeting.
Yeah, so any type of setting, Boston would still be responsible for holding the IEP meeting and doing all of these transition components that we're talking about tonight. That's the really unique part about transition that makes it complicated but individualized, is that you could have a very few services and transition applies. You could be in a residential setting with many services and transition applies. It's about meeting the students at what their vision is and then connecting them with the right agencies for after graduation. So yeah, it's still our responsibility to host all that.
Okay. So part of the referral process to you guys would be under the umbrella of the 688 when you have that meeting, and then you could apply for various other agencies. And do you guys have overlap between like the department and college?
Yeah,
we work together. We work together with mental health. We work together with developmental services.
Yeah, depending on who the regional agency is, DDS might make referrals to
But I think it's important to know that, and that's why your parents to be able to ask those questions, because my daughter's 19, I don't know anyone from MRC yet, so I did ask my daughter's school, when is someone from MRC coming? Which prompted them to call. I think there was that person had left the position and they were filling it. So it's important to know and to ask all these questions, because sometimes they're just not gonna, it's not that they're not telling you, maybe someone at the school just doesn't know or have a full understanding of transition either. So once you have this information, you take it to your school and you ask these questions.
And I would say, even if you got in touch with your school this time last year and there was no knowledge about MRC, we are making a much more concerted effort in the Boston area, but also across the whole state, to really say that we are in each and every public high school across the Commonwealth. So that is still in process because some of the WIOA laws have changed. So if you're not getting the answer that you need, reach out to the supervisor, Kate Doucette, who's listed on this sheet. But try and talk with your school first. But now you are armed with the information about who your counselor that could be serving your student is. But if there's any additional questions, Kate, who couldn't be here tonight, has made it very clear that she is happy to field questions from anybody that has them. So,
and then I think that leads us into, so our next meeting will be a resource fair, which will be here. And we're hoping that MRC will have a table and DDS will have a table. So, we have flyers. Kristen's getting the flyers out right now. So we hope that you'll come, spread it around to your school, because it's going to be really important. I think last year we had maybe 50 tables.
About 50 tables.
About 50 tables
All
with resources.
Organizations with
Exceptional
resources
Lives will be there. Boston Public Schools. There'll be programs that have after-school programs like Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCA's and whatnot. So that will be, in Logan meeting, we'll be doing the resource fair with Tom, who's in back, so he works for Boston Public Schools. He's a new family liaison for BPS. So thank you. Okay. Next and last but not least, is Marisa McCarthy. She's the Assistant Director for Transition in Boston Public Schools. She's not new to the district, but she is new to this position, a much needed position in Boston. And I apologize, I know that it's getting late, but she's going to quickly run through what Boston is doing right now for transition.
So I'll thank you all for coming. I will quickly go through my PowerPoint, but I will stay afterwards. I'll be respectful of the ending of 8:30, but I'm happy to stay afterwards and review the PowerPoint in detail or answer any questions, okay? Like Diane said, the position of Assistant Director for Transition has been vacant for some time in BPS, and transition is of high priority right now within the district, so I wanted to walk you through some of the steps we're taking to try to make sure that staff, families, students all know about transition. And so a lot of the messaging that you heard tonight is important because the staff are getting that same messaging. We're trying to build our relationships. Your special ed coordinators, who are the people that run your IEP meetings, they've all already this year had an MRC training, so they know who their MRC counselors are. They know if there's vacancies in those counselors, what supervisor to reach out to, and they've already received that training, so they can help bring that to you all as parents, okay? For reasons of just processing through, I had posted our special ed vision, which includes post-secondary, but I'm not going to go into this or this in detail. It's really just trying to make sure that you understand that everything our office is doing is trying to recognize that the end goal is successful transition and making sure that every student has a quality of life that he or she wants after high school. And that includes making sure that they have recreational activities, that they are able to travel, living in a setting that's of their desire, that they're able to travel, that they're working, that their life is very full. And so by post-secondary success, that's not measured just by having a job or just by being in a college. It's all of those components that make our lives full. I put this up here so you can see that you're not alone. There's 4,000, this is from last year, there's over 4,000 students within the district of transition age. There are a lot of families that are just getting this information for the first time. that are navigating a system that's really confusing and really individualized. So I put this up here so you know you're not alone and you don't hesitate to ask questions. There are a lot of components that go into transition, and I often think back of how scary it is as you enter the school district. And you're coming from early intervention and coming into the school district for the first time, and many of you probably can remember that was a very scary time. And now you've been with the school for so long, and we're starting to talk about going outside of the school setting. School not being a traditional school day. We're adding work in, we're adding some vocational experiences, some daily living experiences, all outside of the school, and that's to help make sure that when your student transitions, it's really seamless. They really should know who they're going to be working with after high school. It shouldn't be a new person coming on as part of their team. That person should have been part of their team before they left. Okay? So these are, every department within Boston Public Schools has a strategic implementation plan. These are our goals: to develop tools and resources to increase self-determination in students, develop systems and capacity to ensure that transition assessments are up to date for all students 14 through 22, provide program guidance for middle schools and high schools, and launch a system to support shared learning and calibration regarding transition services between staff, students, families, and community. So, what does that mean? Student-led IEPs, student-centered IEPs, self-determination. You hear a lot of different words for this, but it's including your student in the IEP process. It's so important to do that. I've bulleted some of the steps I've been taking to gather what BPS is doing in regards to this and how we plan on sharing this practice. But I also want to share with you, there is a whole continuum of how your son or daughter can be included in on an IEP meeting. It can start with them just identifying one person that they want to invite. That could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a teacher, but that's them advocating for themselves and identifying someone that can advocate for them. That is self-advocacy. That's a great way to have them included. And then there's a whole continuum to some students are running their whole IEP meeting themselves. They're introducing everyone, they're talking about what their goals are, and they're leading the meeting, just like the coordinator. So I leave this for you to look at yourself. We can go through it in detail afterwards. But know that this is the same challenge I've given our coordinators, is pick one of these and include it in your IEP meetings so that we can take first steps in being more student-centered in our IEP meetings. Transition assessments, like you heard in our first presentation, that's ongoing. That needs to start at 14, and we need to be telling you what we're assessing, how we're assessing it, what curriculum we're doing. I did some work today with a new curriculum that we're going to be introducing. Some schools are using it now, but we'll be introducing it in all transition programs. It's called Unique, and our transition specialists, who are part of, it's called Strive within the district, they're going to help our schools understand how to use Unique so that you're able to see what competencies, what skills your student is working on and what progress they're making, so that we know that when, like our MRC talked about, getting out there and having those internships, those job experiences, that we're building in experiences during the school day. At younger times, we brought those services into middle schools, and that they're prepared to actually go out safely and experience their community. Calibrating these services. So since I entered this role in September, part of what I've been doing is going out and visiting schools. I've been meeting with our different partners and trying to gather an understanding of what services we have. And now I'm in the phase of taking those services and making sure they're scaled so that every school knows what options there are out there. And so that every student is getting that shared, same but different transition experience, unique to them. Some of the things we've done are increase our partnerships. We're bringing that curriculum in. We're expanding the role of our transition support specialists, that's Strive. Historically, they've worked with students that are non-diploma bound. They're working with all students and guiding all staff through that now. So we're taking steps to try to make sure that the services are calibrated to be across the entire district. And then we've increased our partnerships, and I'm trying to share those partnerships. And so just to give you a sense of some of these are some agencies we have, and they work on everything from self-advocacy to social to career readiness. And we've increased these services significantly over the course of this school year. Our superintendent has put a focus on this. So impactability, which is a self-advocacy program that runs in our schools. It was in very few schools. It's now, it's going to cross over many schools by the end of the year, and so that grows. Best Buddies, we're opening 9 new chapters, so we'll have 12. 3 are already signed up in the middle schools, 3 in the high schools. So as you can see, we're trying to bring it down to middle schools as well. Young Entrepreneurs is a career readiness program that teaches very soft skills that you need to have before you go out into work. We're doing a train the trainer model, so 21 of our teachers will be what we call YEP certified, and they'll be able to offer those courses. So these are just the SALS course, Self-Advocacy Leadership Series. We have a group of students from McKinley right now that are participating in that course. So we're trying to reach more students with the broad range of partnerships. And how do we measure this? We measure this, there's state requirements that we're working on measuring this with, as well as our own internal processes. But 2 of them are, the state has us do Indicator 13 and Indicator 14. Indicator 13 makes sure that we are writing goals annually that are aligned to your students' vision and their transition goals. It's making sure that we are inviting the agencies to the IEP meetings and that we are inviting students to the IEP meetings. So for your transition age son or daughter, they should always be included in their IEP meeting, and we should always be inviting the agency that we expect will be working with them after high school. We're also contacting, I just finished Indicator 14, where we're actually following up with students who have left high school and seeing if they are enrolled in classes, if they're working, how long they're working for, what agencies they're working with. So these are some great ways that we're getting to measure our work that we're doing to make sure that we are providing you the services that you deserve in regards to transition. And again, one of the things that's very important to me is that we all receive the same training. I think that it's so crucial that the staff and school personnel who are providing these services are getting the same training that you as parents and guardians are getting, that your sons and daughters are empowered by having the training as well. The community, been active. I've been so impressed with the Boston community. There's so many people that reach out, not just agencies that are specific to individuals with disabilities, but real careers, real employers that want to employ individuals with disabilities. They want to learn how to be a strong employer of individuals with disabilities, and they're taking the time to learn how to train and maintain and help grow individuals with disabilities. So that is my presentation, about a 30-minute presentation in 10 minutes. So I just want to give you time to ask questions or stay behind, but it is 8:30, and so I just want to breathe.
Thank you so much.
And
That's a lot of information.
you know, let you know that I'm here. You can contact me anytime. Every one of your schools absolutely has an MRC counselor, DDS, DMH if you need it. There's a lot of partnerships, and you're just going to continue to see this growing and growing. Please encourage us, if we're not including your student in an IEP meeting, encourage us to be stronger and better and make sure that we invite them. So.
thank you everyone for coming. On your way out, there's this advisory from DESE, Department of Education, that just went to all school districts, including Boston, that talks about transition, because even the Department of Education really has a strong focus on this. So I had to give one to my school because they really didn't have a full understanding of it. So just recently at a meeting, I handed it to them for them to review. So you can also do the same. You can bring it to your IEP meeting or just hand it to your SPED coordinator. It's very helpful that you read yourself and then give it to them to inform. So thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it. Be careful driving.
Where are those located?
This is it's right out. It should be right out here. We left.
It's very good.
Yeah, it's an advisory that they put forth throughout the state, and they gave it to all the districts to inform them of what school districts should be doing. So,
does anybody have any questions, real quick, or Melissa? No questions?
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.